Okay, so as we take our seats, I'm Phil Shelley. I work for NHS England as Senior Operational Policy Manager. I head up Net Zero Food now for the NHS. We've got a number of our colleagues that are with us today. We've got Tim Ratcliffe, who's doing a workshop this afternoon. We've got Andy Politti, our National Development Chef, who's in the room. And obviously Emma spoke this morning, and a few members back at the branch holding the fort. So it's often easy to talk about the topics that you know more about. And I've done a few sessions, particularly following the food review. Tim's going to pick up food standards this afternoon. But when I sat down with Paul from Nolex and just, started to share a few things really I felt FM needed to move forward on. And one of those words that we often talk about, but we're not very good at it, is productivity. And I think there are a few reasons for that. And I suppose I want to kind of share a few examples of how do we do that in an exemplary way? How do we look at the challenges that are out there? How can we actually improve our industry? So what's developing? How do we raise productivity across our services? We're measured, and we heard a little bit from Liam around Eric, but we've also got Pam, haven't we? Often feels like a distant auntie and uncle, but we know it's not. And then we've got place that probably is due for some change. So we're working our way through that. We know it takes time to put changes forward and then for them to happen. There are also site visits and inspections that go on. Obviously, we ourselves are involved with that, and then you've got the CQC that do their own. And they sort of start to then recognise those service gaps that are around. However, being on the front foot is a much more comfortable position than being a reactive. And I think the way today is being set up feels as if, we want to be on the front foot. The only worrying aspect around a conference like this is that the converted are here. The ones that are not listening and are keeping their heads down and hope that nobody notices them are not here. And I can guarantee you now there is a lot of work going on to make sure that we find them. And the great thing is the evidence and the data that comes out actually tells a story, but the site visits that we also have gives us a reality. Yesterday I was at Royal Derby. Tomorrow I'm at RUH Bath, and they will be two very, very different hospitals and different setups. But we know the leadership quite well, and therefore we can have a very open and frank discussion about, well, this is what we do well, but actually this is what we're struggling with. So the issue we often have is probably that feeling in the NHS of that ambiguity, that doubt of what is expected of us. And sometimes our service teams, they kind of drift, don't they, almost from day to day. We're often seeking investment, or we're looking for the focus, or what's the directions. Well, surely now is the time to stop thinking about it and actually do it. And we hear it a lot in different trusts about, well, actually we're doing this and we're doing this. That's one of the reasons why Emma explained around exemplary. And it is about getting people together to having a much more joint-up approach. It is fantastic to be recognised and waving that exemplary flag, but to be fair to those trusts, they're waving the flag, but they're there almost to be shot at, to say, well, I thought you were exemplary. And that's not the purpose. The purpose is for those people to stand up and say, I want to be there, I want to be shot at, and I want to be challenged, but I want to also move forward. And it's far more practical to move forward, with others. So, very quickly, as an example, since the inception of the NHS, we know particularly that food has been a vital part of patient recovery. We know that menus were very, very bland. It was often poached cod with potatoes and cauliflower. I mean, you try finding that on a white plate. It's pretty tricky. So it's trying to understand the lack of knowledge, the lack of dietary expertise that was going on there, and yet there was still a very emotive conversation about food. So it may have been happening then in the 1940s, and it's happening right now. Everybody is an expert on food. You can't help but be, can you? The amount of TV programs that are telling you what you should be doing, and the amount of celebrities that are up there actually having a good old bake-off or cook-off on MasterChef. So it is a topic that we all want to know about. It was often the nurse that led the food service, maintaining that primary responsibility at ward level. So if we think of the wider facilities, in those days then, what was the role not just of the caterer, but actually of the cleaner and the wider facilities team? And how was it to develop to ensure that it's fit for purpose? So how do we actually start to present and shape the future? What we had with food is that we were able, in the food review of 2020, we were able, although it followed those difficult deaths of 7 people through listeria, we were able to use that as a line in the sand. It was a time to bring change, bring people together. And for me, the first time it started to happen was through the cleaning and then through the food standards, where we had in-house FM providers, topic experts, all sat in the room together saying we need to work together if we want to make this right. So it's having a catalyst, and the food review, particularly for patient food, was for that. It's kind of having something at the center of our recovery and our well-being. So that is what I call the moment. And that is the moment we need to create for all of our services. Sometimes turning a tragic incident, maybe a disappointment, maybe a patient experience, into an improvement and a vehicle for success. So, managing our services, I'm the last one to tell you how to do that. You're doing it every day. And certainly working in a trust for 30 years, it's one of those things that if you're not careful, it can be a little bit of an autopilot, can't it? You just go in and you almost manage the day that comes at you. Mondays are usually the worst. Tuesday's sort of recovery day. And then Wednesday, you're starting to make a bit of headway. And as you get towards the weekend, you're also preparing for those days that you're not there. What's it like when you go on annual leave, hey? Do any of you ever think, why did I bother going on annual leave? You come back and you get these emails. And that is some of the culture that we actually need to change. You require a balance of effort and skill. And it's great to bring new people into the NHS, and we know that is starting to happen. I'll pick up on that in a bit. But it is so important to have that experience, to have that knowledge, to have that expertise, to have that competency, to have that drive. And I firmly believe it doesn't matter if you've been in the NHS for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you can still have that drive because it is in you to make that change. One of the things as a leader we need in the NHS is patience. It's patience with our teams. It's patience often with the higher authority, because it can go sometimes at a different pace than you want it to go. But I think it's about having a clear understanding of what is expected of you when it comes to productivity and the ambition of your team and your service. And often it's a lack of clarity that creates this biggest hurdle. You can speak to 3 of your leaders in a trust and you get a slightly different story. I think we all know what the financial angle will be, but then you may get the chief nurse angle, you may get the EFM director angle. So it's taken all those into consideration. And for you as leaders, that is tricky, to take that all in and filter it into something that you feel It's appropriate. So if we are going to positively transform the NHS, then every leader needs to be focused on their direction of travel. Liam mentioned it this morning, that every trust is very independent. And we hope that as NHS England, we can start to bring that independence together, but have some joint objectives. There's no bigger investment than that of your workforce. I mean, current conversations right now tell us that culture change takes time, and it is tricky. I mentioned Royal Derby recently, worked very closely with Royal Stoke. You know, they were in the media around food, really difficult challenges around that. But it's how we meet those patient expectations when they go home, and they can write what they want on social media, can't they? And we have to sort of bat that back in a way that says, I hear you, this is what we're doing. Working closely with King's Lynn, Stuart. We know it's one of the RAC hospitals. And how have they been coping over the last few years with buildings that are sort of falling apart, and yet they're still trying to be dynamic in where they want to be in the future. You know, I look around, I know quite a few of you, and you only have to look around the room at each other to feel quite inspired about what you're doing. You know, I'm not going to pick up on names now, right? But we've got people here that have been leading methodologically on cleaning with a real passion and a real ambition to share what they've done well with others. We've got people here from exemplary trusts that are basically saying, look at what we're doing, but we actually want to improve. We've got people here that have developed their 24/7 services in a way that they're incredibly proud. And I've got a colleague here that, you know, we're meeting up early next week where we're just totally looking at new menus for patients. And it is about not accepting what is happening right now, but wanting to change it. And don't just change it off your own back and take a chance, but actually invite a few others that have probably been through that change before to say that, come and have a look at what we're doing and let me know, are we going the right way? What's your view? What do you think? We can learn so much from each other. And it's being willing to take on those things that influence us. And when you walk around the room outside, you can see that digital, methodology, processes, all those things, they are there to innovate us, but we do need a structure and a framework as a bit of a platform. There's nothing worse than trying to springboard up if you're on a soft surface. So you need that foundation, you need that positivity and that confidence. I sometimes wonder how on earth, when we complain about how much our surgeons are being paid, and then you hear about how much our footballers are being paid. And yet when a footballer doesn't play well, they say he's low on confidence. Well, lucky him, that's all I can say. How would you perform if you lost your confidence when you went into work one day? So confidence is a big thing. And you need to look around at each other and ensure that you provide each other with that enthusiasm and that strength to get through. But what we have found is that the standards that have been out there have started to create that foundation. Cleaning and food, and now we're moving on to portering. So we're just about to embark on 3 portering standard sessions. We've got one in Hull, one in Nottingham, and one in Watford. And hopefully that'll just get people face to face, sat round a room. And it's not just about leaders, it's about getting porters to those meetings. And we can start to look at the different work streams. And then we'll break it up so we can have short, sharp Teams meetings with a lot more people on particular work streams. There's much to bear in mind as we structure standards. It'll be the first time we've done it in NHS England. And just you can see with those titles on there, there is a lot to bear in mind. And by golly, we do all of this very differently around the country. And we know that with other services that we have. But what we need to do is engage with those people out in the room out there and understand how can we use that technology to drive, in a way, our clinical relationships. I often think about an awful tragedy that we had a few years ago on the M5 in Somerset. And nobody trains you for these events. In Somerset, we're a little bit, I've got 3 of my colleagues here, they won't mind me saying, we run at our own pace, don't we, in Somerset, and we love it. But when you get up to Birmingham and London, it is very different, but we have to manage things very carefully when you're in rural areas. It's very different. But when you have a tragedy, your teams stand up. And we lost a number of people on an M5 crash. And we had porters that didn't really know how to react. They were actually carrying bits of bodies of people in black bags. And the counselling that took place after that was incredibly severe. And you can only lift your hands up and realize what they go through to ensure that it's not just about nursing and doctors, it's about our cleaners and our porters that often face those day-to-day difficulties. And I'm very proud, of what they showed, not just in those difficult tasks, but the way that they spoke to those relatives that were having to deal with so much difficulty. So what is clear to all of us in NHS is the competence of our cleaning teams throughout healthcare. Our teams are central to the control of infection. They also provide great support at ward level. They're very reactive as well, aren't they? I'm trying to get hold of somebody. Tim will know exactly who I'm talking about. Trying to get hold of somebody in our wider team at the moment. I thought, well, if they're a cleaning team, a matron would have thrown her toys out of her pram by now. And yet within a cleaning and hospital environment, our teams react very quickly. And we should never, ever knock that at all. We know that facilities can often be also a bit of a stepping stone for people. So we often attract people in, and they'll come and they'll work in facilities, particularly in cleaning, and then they'll go on and work at ward level as ward assistants, HCAs. And sometimes it's quite depressing, it's quite knocking, isn't it? Thinking, flipping heck, we brought them in, we've inducted in, we've made them feel welcome, and they've moved on. We should never be ashamed of that. Because I tell you, learning those tasks and the purpose that they play is a significant part of a hospital on a day-to-day basis. What a way to learn about the essentials of care. And also, the relationship between facilities and hard FM can sometimes be a little bit tricky. That's where you often hear the term, it's not my job. And it's important that cleaning can actually play a really fantastic role around the clock because they are 24 hours. It's important that we recognize our cleaners. It's important that we also celebrate what they do well. Within our businesses, the 3 elements of personal, financial, and expertise, that drives success. Bringing skills into the NHS is crucial. The pandemic actually did provide us with a lot of hospitality chefs. That has helped us also understand the success of retail as well as patient catering, because we know it brings different challenges. So we need to learn from other sections and other sectors of the industry. It's important to maintain a professional and also a commercial output. How do we raise the profile of food? Well, as you can see, we've had NHS Chef. This is our 3rd year. Competition is a positive way to share experiences. In NHS Chef, they meet others, They create friendships for life. They will be the centre of making the difference for food in the NHS. And it's certainly great to celebrate what we do well. But with the standards being released in November last year, we will start to call out those that aren't doing well. It is so important that we recognise and celebrate, but so important that we know that things aren't right. So how do we look at our outcomes? Well, we need to measure progress and success, and often the attitude of your team reflects the profile of your leadership. Are you flexible? Are you adaptable? Are you having a joint knowledge of goals with your team? Tim will probably talk a little bit about a starting point, which I think is a perfect reflection of that, and that's food waste. Everybody is involved in the management of food waste. We can't move from year to year with financial instability. We need constancy. The standards, of course, provide that. We need to agree relevant KPIs with our supervisors, our team leaders, and our managers. We need to be brave. We need to step out. And I'm hearing that much more now from people saying, well, I'm just going to do it. Why not? Who else knows more about your services than you? So what do you do? Well, continuously raise the profile of your teams. Make sure that people are aware of the outstanding achievements, but also the areas of concern. All of us are certainly very proud of the role that we play. And finally, there are a number of other services in our portfolios, and we must not forget it. Transport, switchboard, accommodation, post room, notes, security, distribution, waste. So don't tell me that you are not central to the success of the NHS. It isn't all about the clinical teams. It isn't all about board level. Our service-led industry is keeping people safe, is keeping them informed, is helping their recovery, it's moving them around from ward to ward with empathy. And what next? Have a clear plan for each of your services. Involve your teams with the decision-making. Map out what does good look like and set the milestones and the KPIs to measure that journey. You are here because you want that success. It is our role in NHS England to ensure that everybody is on board. So be productive, be compassionate, and be that leader. Brilliant. Thank you very much.